Hey there, if you're a beauty founder, wellness professional, or a healthcare provider building a brand, I made something special just for you. You already have the results, the credentials, the products, the testimonials, the loyal customers. You're credible. You've built something that works. But if your visibility and your revenue still don't reflect the excellence of your work, it's not your offer. The online landscape has changed. The attention economy is fading. And the brands growing fastest right now aren't chasing algorithms, they're owning authority. In my free masterclass, The Authority Era: How to Become an Influential Name in Beauty and Wellness and Attract More Customers, I will show you how to shift from attention to authority and how to use credibility as the engine that drives sustainable growth for the long term. Watch the Authority Era Masterclass free at factorpr.com/authority, and you can find the link in the show notes below. If you've ever found yourself doing all the right things, but still feel exhausted, emotionally flooded, or quietly on the edge of burnout, this episode is for you. Today on Grow Your Wealth, trauma informed coach and nervous system educator Emily Greenway of Rise to Her breaks down what burnout really is and why it has more to do with your past and your wiring than your planner or productivity hacks. We explore how trauma shapes behavior, why the nervous system is the real MVP of leadership, and how to rewire your patterns through inner work, community, and intuitive practices. Emily also shares her signature 3-part framework to help you reconnect with your body, your needs, and your sense of self so that you can lead in business and life better without the burnout. This is not about bubble baths, not about hustle culture. It's about creating safety, power, and possibility from the inside out. I'm really excited about this one. Here's Emily. Emily Greenway, welcome to the Grow Your Wealth podcast. How are you today?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. All right, let's dive in. Okay, Emily, your website, your bio, you say that you do trauma informed coaching, nervous system healing, intuitive practices, helping to guide women, especially to break free from burnout. What does trauma informed coaching, nervous system healing, and intuitive practice mean? If you could kind of give us the dictionary version so that when we get into the nitty gritty, we've got some understanding of language here.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I know trauma-informed nervous system is such a hot topic right now. It's a really big buzzword, but ultimately what it comes down to as trauma-informed is understanding that our experiences shape who we are. And when we go in with a trauma-informed lens, we can take into account all of the experiences that we've had and make sure that we use that to understand and approach with compassion, with kindness, with love, with grace, and say we accept you for your whole humanity. And we acknowledge that those shaped who you are. And so let's take that into our work together. And then nervous system is taking into account that our nervous system, right, which is the thing that responds to fight or flight. So whenever we get scared, we get activated, our nervous system switches on. Is one of the most foundational parts of our body. It's a reptilian system in terms of that it just responds to, is there danger? Is there not, right? It's this evolutionary system that kept us alive when we were being attacked by other tribes, when there was a lion after us. But for most people, that switch got turned on. So there's a part of our brain called the amygdala that responds to cortisol spikes, and it says, oh, you need to be looking out for danger. A lot of our switches got turned on. And we never upgraded the software to say, hey, you actually can turn off. You can go back into what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and digest part. A lot of us know that when we're really stressed, maybe we're either gaining weight or losing weight really fast. We're having headaches. We're constantly waking up in the middle of the night. And that's because that sympathetic nervous system is turned on. The speed up, the be alert. So we understand that the symptoms of what it means to have an activated nervous system, but we don't really understand how we got there, and that we actually needed to up upgrade our system, our software of our brain to say, hey, you can relax. We're not constantly being attacked there. So when I say I do a trauma-informed and nervous system approach, I recognize the humanity of everyone that I work with and that we are humans that have to upgrade the software in our brains and our body, take into account all that we've experienced so that we can do more than just survive and get by.
Oh, I love that. And that is, I know we're going to dive into this more, but so, so relevant for entrepreneurs, especially because sometimes, especially if you're running a larger business with a huge team, the health and happiness of your team, right, comes back to looking at your leader and examining like how they are showing up at work every day as well. So doing that deeper inner work, I can only imagine, and you'll share some examples with us here shortly, can be so powerful. But first, how did you get into this? This is such a cool profession.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been an interesting ride. So, my background is in clinical research. So, I have my master's degree in public health, specializing in health behavior theory. And so part of that training is understanding why humans make the decisions they do. What are the environmental influences, the societal influences, and what led to those decisions, what perpetuates those decisions, and what are the impacts of that. So I took that research, I took that training, and I started working with women and children who had experienced sexual assault, domestic violence, any types of perpetuation onto them, and studying emotional regulation, addiction, how the brain responded to that, and what ultimately led into the outcomes that many of them were experiencing, which was the addiction, the hypervigilance, the higher risk taking. Went from that into HIV and AIDS advocacy, working in medical case management. Same thing there. We were looking at a systematic issue of people that were living in poverty most of the times, people that wouldn't talk about taboo topics. And I say that in quotes because I want it to not be taboo. And we had to, again, work with individuals that needed to be on medication for the rest of their life. And that takes a lot of work because it's being told, oh, you have to do this or you'll die, right? It's a really heavy topic. And so we had to work with decision making, understanding how to make conscious decisions and how to get those trauma responses to stop running the show. From there, I went into child welfare. So I was working with families at risk of losing their kiddos. So what that made me realize is ultimately what led to Rise to Her is that we are traumatized children. We are just humans in adult bodies. And for many entrepreneurs, for many leaders, we have been externally successful. People look at us and they're like, oh, you're fine. You don't have anything wrong with you, right? And ultimately, we don't have anything wrong with us, right? We've survived. We've developed these coping mechanisms, whether that's overworking, whether that's snapping at our families, our kids, right? We've become dysregulated. But externally, people look at us and go, you're fine. You're successful. But that doesn't mean that you're living the life that you want, right? And so I was able to translate that working in the families at risk of losing their kiddos because they were traumatized children in adults' bodies. How do we implement those tools, those exercises, those intuitive practices to help them ultimately remember who they are? Remember that this doesn't have to be a life of just surviving, of just getting by, of your relationships falling apart and only working to live, right? While some people are working to live, working to survive, to just pay the paycheck or just keep the lights on, for many entrepreneurs, for many people in leadership, they're still working to live. It just looks a little differently. And so I'm a firm believer that when we're able to take our passions, understand our purpose, and do it from a regulated state, we see the ripple effects all over our towns, our communities, our teams. So that kind of led me into starting this business. And I'm also in clinical research where we look at suicide behaviors and trying to reduce the risk of suicide when people are at their most vulnerable. So ultimately helping people make the best decisions that they can, live a life that sets their soul on fire, and help the world heal at the same time.
That's so incredible. What does that look like based on the work that you're doing with your clients over at Rise to Her? Paint us a picture, perhaps, of a past client, existing client, or a typical client scenario. what does that look like, right? Their day to day, how they're showing up in their business, but the inner work that they're doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the big differences that I see when people come to me is when I ask, well, tell me about how that's showing up in your emotions and your relationships. And there's usually a shutdown. Well, we're here to talk about my work. It's like, yeah, but we're all interconnected, right? It's a holistic perspective. A lot of people come to me at a crossroad. They know that there's something else out there for them. They've been doing this successful track. They've been getting the degrees, the certifications. Maybe they're making the six figures, but they're saying, is this all there is? How does this feel better? So I had a client come to me a year and a half ago. We've been working together ever since. And she was running a business. And she was like, Emily, I wake up and I dread going in. I was like, well, first of all, I need to tell you, while that may be common, that's not normal, right? And that's a really big thing I want everyone listening to this to hear is we've normalized a lot of things that don't need to be normalized in our world. And so working with her was helping her understand where she was meeting those core needs, which we all have. They are common among us all, which is love, acceptance, safety, community, where she was meeting those core needs and confusing them with her values. So something that we call soul aligned values that rise to her is a big differentiation between your soul purpose and what you need to strictly survive. So over working with her, we had to do a lot of grief work, a lot of understanding where she was meeting those needs of being accepted by her parents, the expectations from others to help her realize, oh, this is actually what I've always been passionate about. This is what I've always wanted the world to know. Perfect. Now let's take those values. Let's implement them in your self-leadership. So how are you showing up and leading yourself in home and work? And then that's going to translate into how you show up at work, right? How are you leading your teams? Are you in a place that's regulated where you're responding to crises that are bound to happen? Or are you being more reactive, right? And that's going to trickle over into the friendships you're attracting, the relationships you're attracting. Are you happy with your income level? Yes or no? If yes, perfect. Then let's look at what's different about that versus the other things in your life that you're not super stoked about. Let's look at the stories there. Let's go into that subconscious reprogramming and ultimately help you feel safe in your body and externally communicate that to the world.
Something that you said too, Emily, just kind of reminded me of thinking of situations, even in my own life, where something at work goes astray. You had a bad day, and how that also affects your personal life, undoubtedly, right? Because, like you said, it's holistic. You can't separate the person from the circumstance. There's not work arena and, personal arena. They're all living in the same body and the same mind, right? That being said, I can see the impact of that sort of inner work, right? You're working on yourself personally, which impacts your work, which would also come to back like to help kind of empower you to face these challenges head on at work without it coming back and disrupting your personal life and causing this cycle of destruction, right? If we don't have the tools to be able to be more resilient, have this awareness of some of this trauma that we may have experienced, whether as children or otherwise. So I think that that's such a gift that an entrepreneur can give to themselves. And I know that you've said that well-being isn't a luxury. Of course, could not agree more with that. And that it's really the foundation of sustainable leadership, as you call it. Why do you think so many high achievers, like the ones that you work with, treat this kind of self-care and this kind of coaching like it's an optional add-on instead of really a core practice to nurture themselves as well as their business?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. This is what we've been conditioned to believe, right? We have been conditioned and socialized to believe that well-being is a luxury because of how our system was set up. Our system was set up by people in power that outsourced caring for others, emotional labor, childcare to other people. And then they've set up our system, our capitalistic system, which ultimately we benefit from, but a lot of people suffer, and we're suffering emotionally and mentally, right? And so we have to look at how the system was set up. And so when we believe that that's the only option, we equate that with, if I invest in all of this frivolous, I say with quotes, self-care, then I'm not going to get work done, right? Who told you that? Where did that story come from? And what are you classifying as self-care and well-being, right? We have to get really to the bottom of that as well. Because if we continue to perpetuate these stories and what I would call a lie of overworking and constant productivity, we're going to suffer. Our marriages, our relationships, our businesses, our incomes, and ultimately our bodies are going to break down. This isn't something that's optional. We have to take care of it now. And if you're not sleeping through the night, if you're snapping at your family, if you are sacrificing meal breaks, it's already showing up in your life. And I want to tell people that as leaders, we have the option to break the system, to break the paradigm, starting in our own lives and then our teams and our companies.
Would you say then burnout is a systems issue?
100%. 100%. And then it's cyclical, right? It's okay, these people in power have created these systems that force us to burn out, but there's no other option but to keep going, because if not, how do we make money? How do we survive? How do we support our families? So it's not this super easy answer, just quit your job and move to Bali, right? That it doesn't work that way. And so now it becomes a really crucial question of how do we sustainably make these changes? We recognize that we're here. Our outcome is burnout. How do we start to pull back the layers slowly, systematically, sustainably, in a way that we have a path to work forward instead of absolutely overhauling our life? Because most people come to me and they're like, I want to quit my job. I want to get a divorce. This is happening. I'm like, got it. I understand, because that's a runaway and this will fix my problem, right? But we have to slowly start back by grounding our nervous system, getting back in our bodies so that we can make those conscious decisions. Because when we're in that burnout, we're not even in a place where we can question the systems that got us there. So of course it benefits those that are in power. Of course it benefits those that set up the system. And then there's a whole nother conversation talking about women, minorities, people of color, LGBTQ, and how they are also taking the brunt of what this system was set up to do.
Absolutely. I'm reading a really fascinating book right now called The Ambition Trap. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but it came out a few months ago. And it's about marginalized people and how it's become so easy to fall into this trap that seems like ambition, but it's almost like toxic ambition. I'm not sure if that's something that you come across with in your work with your clients. I find it so fascinating because I feel like I see or have seen some of myself in there too. I come from a background, my parents are immigrants, they're small business owners, they're still working, brought up to believe that the key to success is hard work and putting everyone ahead of you, right? Doing all of the work for your family and nothing left for you, right? And what is that clearly going to lead to, Emily, is burnout, right? When you literally have nothing left in your tank. But the crazy thing about it, and I want to talk to you about some of this unpacking and this nervous system work, is that it can feel so automatic for those that are in it, right? You're just like, this is the way that I've always seen it done. This is the way that I'm going to do it because that's the way I was kind of conditioned to do it. And it feels hard, but we have to, like many of your clients probably come to this point where it's like, choose your hard, right? Do you want it to be hard how it is now, or do you want to, take the hard road that changes your life potentially and do the hard inner work? What does that work look like though? Like when we talk about this inner work, this inner healing, this nervous system work, I mean, is it meditating twice a day? Is it journaling? Is it all the things? Give us some of your secrets.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that we start with a framework to help us understand the work that we're doing here. So I approach everything with a three-pronged framework. First thing that we all have to go through is the awareness. That is the waking up, noticing, I don't like this. This isn't working for me, right? We have to get to that point for anything to ever shift, right? And that's going to create a lot of cognitive dissonance for us. There could be people listening to this podcast going, this girl does not know what she's talking about. You cannot be successful and take care of yourself. Like, that is not possible, right? I want you to question where that came from. And if you ultimately decide that that's how you want to live your life, beautiful. I want you to have conscious decision making. When I mean conscious, it's not just an automatic response. It's going, I know where that decision came from. But that cognitive dissonance, and what that means is we've learned something that now contradicts something we were taught to believe. And that cognitive dissonance feels confusing. It feels overwhelming. It feels like your world is starting to shake a little bit. I get excited when my world starts to shake a little bit because I know there's an up level and there's a change coming, right? But that's because I have conditioned my nervous system to know that I have the tools and I have the community to support that awareness change, right? So that's going to be one of my biggest tips and tricks. Have a community that you can rely on. We've been sold this lie, this American dream for any of our listeners in the state, that's pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You do it by yourself. And I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and I said, I started to question that. Where did that conversation come from? Where do you hear that from? A lot of that conversation is in the middle to lower income individuals. When you start looking at those that are making multiple six figures, even approaching the billionaire mark, they understand the importance of connections, networking, and community. Because we were never meant to do this alone. Sociologically, you look back over hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of years, we existed in tribes. And we relied on each other for that. That's how our systems were set up. And so if you are an entrepreneur and you're doing this online business work, get into a community, whether online or in person, and make sure that you have a system that can support your entire humanity. You're not just a business owner. You're not just a mom, a dad, a caretaker, a leader. You are multifaceted. And to be able to do that, you need to have people that recognize that and can support all the moments. So that's going to be one of my biggest things. So we said that was with the awareness, recognizing, oh, something's got to shift. For most people, they're there. Something has to shift. The next step, which is where that deep work comes in, is the awakening. When we awaken, we start to awaken to our reality, right? Think about in the morning, you awaken to the day and you have all the things that you need to take care of. Well, in our inner awakening, we're recognizing what we want. A lot of us, again, confuse that with our core values. With our core needs, which are the things that we need to survive. The safety, the community, right? But when we awaken, we start to recognize what our unique soul's path is. I'm going to get a little mystical here, a little woo. A lot of what I do brings in the magic side of things. And when I say magic, we are more than just a human on the 3D planet. I believe, and I think many of the listeners will agree, that we all came here for a reason. We all have our unique path. And it's typically deeply connected with what interests us, what we're good at, what deeply convicts us. But why have we started to confuse those things with our core needs? Well, conditioning to keep us in survival. And so when we awaken and we start to do this inner work, which is what we do inside of both my membership rooted and when you're working with me one-on-one, is we start to unpack those layers. We are doing inner child work. We're regulating the nervous system, and we're asking the deep questions of how that's showing up in both your personal life your business, and every other facet of our life, right, are multifaceted. And we have to start this work by grounding the nervous system, because science tells us that most people are living in an activated nervous system. And that actually shuts off our brain's ability to be able to take in new information and process it. It cuts off our creativity. It cuts off our ability to connect deeply with others. They've done brain scans of people that are activated versus in like a regulated meditative state. And so for us to then up-level our life, increase our creativity, make more money, help heal our relationships, we've got to be regulated. That typically for most people is about 30 days of intentional resetting. For other people that have had more complex trauma, that can take 3-6 months. It really depends, but it's constant. When I say constant, I don't mean every single waking moment, but every day coming in, breathing, dropping into the body. There's a reason so many people talk about meditation and breath work. It works, right? It rewires the neural pathways, which is how we make subconscious decisions. We make over 30,000 decisions a day. If we had to consciously think through all of those decisions, oh my gosh, we would be an absolute mess, right? So that's why we subconsciously respond. It's ingrained into our neural pathways. So for those neural pathways that aren't serving us anymore, we have to start giving them another option. So in that awakening phase, we're taking what has now been unconscious, bringing it to conscious awareness, and making a different decision. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's why you do it with a coach, a therapist, a community, because it's going to contradict what you want. And then finally, that third step is that reclamation. Consciously and actively re-choosing yourself every single day. And that's where and I use my hands if people are watching the video, because brain scans have showed us the neural pathways literally disconnecting and then reconnecting to a neural pathway. It's wild. It's incredible. Our brain that's neuroplasticity. It can change. It can rewire. And so when we're in the reclaiming phase, we're undoing and we're redoing it to that other pathway to eventually it sticks. And we don't have to think about it anymore. And what was once a reactive response now becomes regulated, now becomes ingrained in us.
Hi, friends. I want to tell you about our new and improved authority accelerator from Factor PR called RealFluence. RealFluence is the only membership that helps beauty and wellness founders grow their reputation and authority to attract new customers without endless discounting, advertising, or going viral. Inside, you'll learn how to get recognized for your product or your expertise, partner with other founders, and become the name people trust and talk about, all with the guidance and community to support you every step of the way. Remember, you can't buy authority, you have to earn it, and RealFluence is here to help. Visit therealfluence.com to get started. I wanted all of that. That sounds amazing. So we're talking about awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then awakening, followed by reclamation. So then really stepping into that higher version of yourself, which is so important, especially as a leader, those that are listening that all want to grow your wealth, right? Sometimes we don't realize how often, if we're the ones at the top, that we are the bottlenecks, and that doing this kind of deep inner work ultimately will unlock this better version of you to be able to have the life and the business that you ultimately want, which is so impactful. It's not going to just like come to you, scrolling on Instagram. You really do, it sounds like, need your people, need some guidance, need that community. Tell us a little bit about Rooted. I did see that on your website. It sounds like such a magical community that you have there.
I love
Who's
that
that for?
Yeah, I love that you use the word magical, because that is how I want everyone to describe it. Rooted is for anyone that wants to live a more grounded, purposeful, impactful life. So if you want to grow your business, if you want to heal your relationships, if you want to be more intuitively led, and when I mean intuitively, you are consciously responding with integrity, in alignment with your soul values, right? So in there, we have multiple entrepreneurs. We have people that are high up in their companies. We have people that are moms and dads that ultimately know that they want a more well world. They have a deep desire for a more safe world, healthy world, and just overall holistically beneficial for everyone world. And a lot of them are spiritually inclined. And when I mean spiritually inclined, they have said, I love the breath work. I love the meditation. Now, how do we take this and actually heal the world, improve the world, right? Starts with ourselves. And so we take both a psychology back framework. So I bring in all of my graduate level training of what will change your brain, what will support your healing, and blend it with seasonal magic. And what I mean by that is we take what the world teaches us, because a lot of us try to look to all these other gurus for answers. You're your own guru. The world has so much evidence of how to heal. And we use seasonal magic here. So we go through the seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring. And we take what it teaches us. In fall, where we're at right now in the Northern Hemisphere, this is about shedding, about letting go. So at the end of October, we're opening our shadow workshop, where we're diving into our shadows. We're diving into the things that we want to hide away, and we're going to shine a light on them. Because as we enter into the winter season, that's where we go inward. We're getting slow. We're staying home more, maybe. Things are getting colder depending on where you're at. Crops agriculturally aren't as fruitful, right? And so this is about making sure we're okay with ourselves. And then when we go into the spring, we're blooming again. We're getting back into things, right? We're producing. In the summer, we did a Summer of Joy workshop, which is about reclaiming your joy and rewiring your brain to seek it out. Because a lot of us are like, well, I'm just not a joyful person. You can retrain your brain to do that. And I taught people how to do that over an 8-week workshop. And you have access to all of those. They're self-paced unless they're live in a brand new workshop. And then we do it together. We also bring in moon magic. And so that's a full moon meditation every full moon. And we tap into what the energetics are asking us to do. What's going to be supportive of us right now so that we can go inward. We can take what the universe is offering us and heal, reclaim that self. Because I truly believe that when leaders, entrepreneurs, moms, dads, whoever they are, come back and get rooted in themselves, the trickle effect, everyone notices. You can't help but let that overflow into every avenue of life. And rooted is where well-being just isn't, it's not just an option. It is what we do. It is where we focus on taking care of you, right? A lot of people go into these masterminds about growing your business. What about you? You can't separate personal growth and business growth. They are so intertwined. And that's why I'm so passionate about giving people a space to be held. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the leader, the know-it-all here. You can come here and be deeply held, deeply human, and know that that is going to help you increase your wealth, help you heal your relationships, help you know what your next creative project is because your brain's regulated and you can tap into the creative parts of your brain.
So incredibly important. I hope everyone heard that loud and clear. I love that you lean into the seasonality of just the world around us, right? It's not by coincidence, it's by design.
Yeah.
And yet I certainly see it with, my own clients, this fighting against it sometimes, right? Like there's never a break. There's never a lull. A lull must mean that you're failing in some cases too, right? Because if you're not growing, you must be dying. And what I'm hearing from you is that inner growth is still growth, and reflection is like planting those seeds for the season that you can really flourish. So I absolutely love that. I'm working myself with a guest that we had on this podcast before on leadership coaching. And that's something else that I'm going to have to introduce you to, Emily. She has been helping me work through too, is like there are seasons for pounding the pavement, execution, and seasons for kind of stepping into that more intuitive state and really just kind of getting to know yourself a little bit better and what success ultimately looks like. So many of us are just chasing a goalpost and then we get there and forget about the goalpost because we're on to the next one. I think that's so beautiful. And I feel that that can also help these entrepreneurs listening also remember that pace is just a construct in many ways. I often say like slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It might feel slow, but you'll probably get to where you're going a lot faster than had you try to do it without you, try to do it without a community, and try to do it against, what's natural just in terms of the seasons around us. So no, I don't think it's woo. It's so funny having guests on the podcast. And for those that have, listened to a lot of episodes, woo comes up a lot. I think that you have to balance the woo with the execution and the sort of left brain and right brain, because we're human, right? And that totally makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the when you go in to be the intuitive part and when do you like pound the pavement, you've got to execute, right? Because there's this conversation where I think there's been confusion that being grounded, being rooted is contradictive to hard work.
Yeah.
But that's not really the conversation. That's confusion, right? It's that the hard work is meaningful, is conscious, and it's actually creating movement instead of just working hard for the sake of working hard. Who are you proving that to? Because I can tell 100% always comes back to the parents in childhood, guys. Always, always, always.
Mom and dad, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, 100%. And knowing that we might be in very different seasons from each other. That's okay. Right. I have one client now who, he's actually a male client. I love working with men as well. And he lives in an area of the country where it's finally cooling off, but it's still going to be warm. And so for him, he was saying, I'm getting into my summer. These past few months, I've really been like in my house trying to cool off. And I've been like in this deep growth phase where I knew something had to change. Now I'm ready to do the work. And that comes with, again, the awareness, being able to check in with yourself and saying, where am I at right now? What do I need to do to make sure that I'm supporting myself as a human, honor the humanity before you can ascend? I say that with quotes again. It's not like you're becoming this like ascension, rising to the stars. You're just standing up. You were seated. Now you've stood up. You've changed your perspective. That's all it is. That's all it is. And we all have the capability to stand up. We just have to know. We have to have someone to believe in us. We have to have someone to demonstrate that to us. Because if we've never seen it before, if we've never had it demonstrated, our brain doesn't have evidence to believe that it's true. And it says, that's different than I've ever seen. That's dangerous. Change is dangerous to our brain until we upgrade the system, until we make it excited, until we say, oh no, I have the tools. Because if I fall when I stand up, I know how to get back up. It's fine. I got this. And that's just upgrading the software and learning that it's possible, right? And I know for like one of the coolest stories that I like to tell people about learning what's possible is one of my very best friends. We met when I was living in Colorado in Denver, and I had just gotten out of a really abusive relationship. And he met me in the depths where I was an absolute mess. And I knew we were going to be besties when he texted me, and I was having trouble eating because I was so nauseous and so anxious. Text me, hey, I dropped breakfast at your door. Please make sure that you eat. And from then on, we were hanging out all the time. We moved in together, again, strictly platonic friends. And my card got declined at coffee. I didn't have $3 in my account.
Wow.
And I went to him and I was like, I need you to I need to tell you where I'm at financially. Like, all my credit cards are maxed out. There was a point where I had to feed my dogs, who are in the background, hot dogs and white bread from the Dollar Tree. I had no money. And he helped me redo my resume, because I had a master's degree at this time. I had a master's degree by the time I was 22, right? So in the mix of me eventually getting to this business, my life fell apart. I can tell that story for another time. And he helped me redo my resume. That's action, right? We paired this theoretical support with action. And then we had a conversation about money. We had a conversation about what was possible, because I came from a family that didn't have that. That was like my first job out of graduate school with a master's degree. They offered me $38,000 and I thought that was the best thing ever, and I took it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I didn't know. And I tell you this story because in 6 months of us having this conversation, I doubled my salary, because he showed me what was possible. That happens in relationships, in money, in business, and friendships. If you're saying, I don't know how to get there, I don't know how to change, show your brain what's possible. Surround yourself with people who've done things differently than you. Question it. Have your own awareness shift, so that you can awaken into what is possible. Because we were not put on this planet to just survive and get by. We were truly put here to remember our holiness. Remember that we are connection to source, universe, right? And if you haven't remembered that, there's so much out there. Like, get excited. If you're like, I don't know what that feels like, get excited. Because there's so much opportunity for you to remember your own magic. And that is what I'm so passionate about, because, man, when us leaders, when we remember our magic, man, everything's going to shift.
Oh, that is so powerful. It reminds me of a client I had. He is, I should say, a meditation teacher. And he used to say to us, just imagine if, at the time I was living in Cleveland, just imagine if everyone in Cleveland meditated. Like, the whole vibe, everything would change. And I'm getting those vibes from you too, Emily. Just imagine if we all did this inner work together in a safe space, in a community. It's not just about changing and uplifting ourselves, but the world around us too. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Rise to Her, just all spelled out, normal. I haven't been super active on there because I've been in the middle of a big move. We've just moved to Oregon. So I haven't been super active, but I'm still there. I'll get back into it when I feel called. I have a podcast also called Rise to Her. And then my email, emily@risetoher.com. And my website, risetoher.com. It's all the same. But yeah, you can find me on all of those things. I have a weekly podcast that comes out. We blend the magic with the science to help you heal from burnout and create success that feels good to you. And then, yeah, we have Rooted. We meet every other week. We have a group chat. It's just a really beautiful community.
Amazing. You are such a gift, Emily. We'll have all of those links down in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.